Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Well, if you're new here, today I'm going to be talking about something that will honestly make or break your flying experience with the DJI Neo 2, and that's going to be the batteries. And before we get into it, just a quick note to say that I'm not sponsored in any way. I'm just sharing what I've learned over my experience of flying drones for the last 9 years with you to make sure that you do get the best from your batteries. Now, although DJI do state you should get around about 80 minutes of flight time per battery, in the real world you're lucky if you're going to get 10 to 12 minutes. But the good news is that with the right habits you can keep your batteries healthier for longer, and more importantly avoid any mid-air sort of dropouts. So in this video I am going to go through the battery habits that can literally extend the usable life cycle of your batteries, the best charging setups you got if you have a multi-drone kit, and how to spot a failing battery before it starts ruining flight. So first of all, let's talk about the gap between expectation and reality. Now, the DJI Neo 2 is marketed optimistically with, as I said, up to about 18 minutes flight time. But that's in perfect conditions in the lab where there's no wind, constant temperature and perfect flying conditions. But in reality, outside, you're going to have wind resistance, your camera usage, altitude changes, constant acceleration and braking of the drone, and all of this is going to drain power fast. And that's why most pilots consistently see maybe 10 to 12 minutes of battery time, especially if you're flying slightly more aggressive or you're doing any sort of filming. Now, having a shorter runtime on your batteries isn't just an inconvenience. It's actually a warning sign to show that your batteries are working hard on every single cycle. And that means that your battery care isn't going to be optional if you want to have really consistent performance. So there are 5 things you can actually do to help more or less double the expected life of your battery. The first one is to not store your batteries at 100%. And this really is a big one, because if you finish flying and then recharge the battery and then leave your battery fully charged for days, you're slowly degrading it. Instead, try and aim to get the battery charged to around about 60 to 70% if you're going to store it and you're not going to be flying it again for a little while. And that level is round about 2.5 lights flashing on the drone, because although the batteries do auto discharge, they don't discharge fast enough. And then going the other way, you want to try and avoid doing deep discharges. So try not to push the flight every time so that the drone is basically forced into a landing, because consistently draining the battery down to 0 stresses out the cells. So it's a better habit of landing the drone when you get round about maybe 20 to 25% remaining power. It will mean maybe 2 or 3 minutes less flying, but it is a smaller buffer that's going to make a huge difference in the overall life of the battery. The next one is going to be the temperature of the batteries. And if you have batteries which are cold, they're going to underperform. And if you've got hot batteries, they're going to degrade faster. So if it's cold, try and warm your battery up before flight. Hold them in your hands or use a battery warmer if you have one. Even better, try and keep them on an inside pocket of a jacket. So that means the batteries are going to be more or less body temperature when you go to fly them. And if it is warm, avoid charging them straight after a flight. Let the batteries cool down a little bit first, because like people, they don't like extremes of temperature. And then number 4 is to rotate your batteries evenly. So if you've got a multi battery kit, like most people probably would have with a DJI Neo 2, don't just use the best battery every time, because that's going to create uneven wear. Instead, try and number your batteries and then use them in a rotational order so the batteries are going to be used equally. And this is one of the simplest ways to extend your whole sort of battery life. Now, number 5 goes against one of the features you do have actually on the DJI Neo 2, and that's to avoid fast charging all of the time. Now, although fast charging is convenient, it does generate a lot more heat, and heat means that you're going to have more sort of long-term capacity loss. Now, the DJI Neo 2 does support up to 65 watts fast charging when you're using a two-way charging hub paired with a compatible USB-C power adapter. Now, it does take around about 68 minutes to charge all 3 intelligent batteries simultaneously, and you will need a charger that's rated at over 45 watts. Now, if you've got a charger which is rated between 30 and 45 watts, then you can only charge 2 batteries at a time, whilst chargers below 30 watts will only charge them one at a time or sequentially. Now, you can charge the battery directly in the body of the drone, but the aircraft limits that charge to 15 watts, and it's going to take around about 70 minutes to complete a solo battery. So my advice really would just to use the standard charge whenever you're not in a rush, and really only reserve that fast charging for days when you are really in an emergency. So just a quick break here to say, if you are finding it useful, if you could do the like, subscribe, notification bell and the hype, that would be greatly appreciated. It does help the channel out more than you would know. There's also an option there for buy me a coffee, and you're probably aware that the new Potensic Atom 3 is going to be released next month, which I'm hoping to get. I'm currently around about £150 short of actually buying the drone for the channel, so any donations I get via buy me a coffee would be greatly appreciated. As I said, it's going to go back into the channel itself because I'm not ultimately sponsored. So as I did say earlier in the video, if you are flying the DJI Neo 2, the chances are you're not using one battery. You're going to have a selection of batteries that come with the drone. And you need to look at the charging strategy in relation to these batteries as well. So the first option you've got is to use the original manufacturer's equipment, or the charging hub, and that's going to give you the best safety and balance when it does come to charging your DJI Neo 2. And it's also going to be the most reliable, because it means that the batteries are going to be charged correctly, and it's going to prevent any sort of overheating. So really, when you are using this, the best practice, as I said earlier, is not to go for the quick charging, but rather to use a lower wattage plug and then charge the batteries sequentially, and let the batteries cool before you put them in the dock or before you put them into the drone. Now, the second option you've got is if you're using a multi-port smart charger, which is one of those little plugs with a number of different USBs on the back of it. And these are handy if you're traveling or shooting professionally and you need a multi-port charger for charging other things, as well as the drone, maybe your phone or your Apple Watch. So when you do that, you do need to look for one which is going to have a balanced output across all the ports, may have some sort of temperature control, and one that's also going to automatically stop the charge when the battery is actually full. Now, you do need to be wary of third-party chargers which haven't got any sort of safety certifications, because these can actually mess with the cell calibration and damage the drone's battery a lot quicker. Now, the third option is to use sort of a rotational charging method. So what you could do is charge one or two batteries to that 65 to 70% before you start flying. Then just before you go to fly, charge them up to 100%. Now, when you're flying the drone, you can then use a power bank to charge the third or any subsequent batteries up to that way. That way, the batteries are being charged and then being used directly straight away once they are fully charged. You're not damaging the batteries by keeping them hanging about in case you may never use them for those particular flights. So this means in effect that you are going to reduce the heat buildup and keep your charging cycle sort of more natural. Now, there's also a number of ways that you can spot a battery which is starting to fail. And this is very important, and you don't really want to ignore any of the telltale signs you're going to get from a battery. And the things you need to watch are for sudden voltage drops. So if the percentage that you've got on the battery drops from, say, 40 to 20% in seconds, then that's going to be a red flag that there's something wrong with your batteries. Another one is going to be uneven flight times. Now, by this, I mean that if you've got one battery which maybe gives you 10 minutes of flight time, another one which gives you only 7 minutes, that's an indication that that second battery is aging faster, especially if you are using a rotational sequence to use the batteries in order and charging them correctly before use. The third one is going to be for any swelling or heat spikes when using the battery. So if a battery does feel unusually warm after a normal flight, or there's any sort of swelling, you need to stop using that battery immediately, because it does pose the risk of bursting into flames. So the fourth one is going to be charging inconsistency. And by this, I mean if you do have a single battery which normally takes, say, 70 minutes to charge, and then you've got one which only takes 45 minutes to charge, that could be due to some sort of internal resistance that the cells are encountering. So again, you want to stop using that second battery. And then the final one is auto landing behavior, if that's kicking in too early, because the drone is going to start initiating an auto landing sequence because it's compensating for any sort of unstable output from the batteries to the motor. So as I said at the beginning of the video, you're not going to get any more than about 10 to 12 minutes of flight time per battery, and that's not going to be something you're going to be able to change. But with good habits, you are going to be able to change the actual lifespan of the battery, and that's going to give you that 10 to 12 minutes for a longer period of time overall. But you do need to get into the habit of treating the batteries correctly. So don't charge them up to 100% and then store them for any length of time. Always try and charge them for 60 to 70% or 2.5 lights and then store them. Also avoid the deep discharging, because you don't want the batteries fully empty. Look at the temperature and only use them in the right conditions, not too hot and not too cold. And remember as well to cycle the batteries. And when you are charging, it is always better to charge them solo and only use the fast charging in cases where you are really in a rush. And using tips like this will add up to a longer lifespan for your batteries and fewer in-flight surprises for your Neo 2. And honestly, I know battery care isn't exciting, but it's one of the most important parts of drone flying if you do want to keep your drone reliably in the air. And that's it for another video. Like I said, if you did find it useful, if you could do the like, subscribe, notification bell, that would be greatly appreciated. And there's the option there for buy me a coffee. And I just dropped my batteries on the floor now, so that's not good care. That would be greatly appreciated too. The battery care does apply across all of the DJI drones. It's not going to be limited to the DJI Neo 2. Now, if you've got any questions in relation to the DJI Neo, the Neo 2, the Mini 4 Pro, the Mini 5 Pro, the Light Door 1, the X1 or the Hover Air Pro or Pro Max, also let me know in the comments below. And if there's anything you want to see, just let me know and I'll catch you again next time. Thanks very much. Bye.